Sonata Mansion, a terrifying secret. Javed was a journalist who loved chasing mysterious and horror-filled stories. When he heard about Sonata Mansion, his curiosity and excitement grew. While gathering information from the locals, he heard strange tales. Some said the mansion was haunted by spirits, while others claimed it was a hub for dark magic. To Javed, these were just myths, but he was convinced that some hidden truth lay behind this story. One night, Javed went to the mansion with his camera and notebook. As soon as he stepped inside, he felt a chilling cold and suffocating atmosphere. The door was open, but inside, it felt like time had stopped. The first night passed without incident, but the next morning, he discovered that his recorder, which he had left on the table, had turned on by itself. A voice had been recorded saying, "Leave this place. It is not for you." This startled Javed, but he decided to continue his investigation. In another part of the mansion, he found a library. There, he discovered an old diary belonging to someone named Zainab. In the diary, she mentioned the mansion's owner, Mir Ibrahim, who was a wealthy but troubled man. However, one page of the diary stood out. "Mir Ibrahim has trapped his soul in this mansion. He tried to stop me, but I escaped. Yet I fear he won't let me go forever." Javed realized there was a deep and sinister secret hidden in the mansion. The next day, he ventured into the basement, the most frightening part of the mansion. There, he found an old box containing some talismans and a locked book. When he opened the book, a piercing scream echoed through the mansion. In front of Javed appeared a horrifying figure, tall, with white eyes and a burnt face. The figure spoke, "You have opened what was locked. Now, you belong here." The basement doors began to slam shut on their own. Javed tried to escape, but every door closed in his face. Along every path, he saw burned figures and heard people screaming. They all repeated the same words, "You are trapped too." In one room, he saw the shadow of Zainab. She said, "There's only one way for you to leave this place. You must free the soul trapped in Mir Ibrahim's heart, or you will become part of this mansion forever." Javed decided to follow her advice. He returned to the basement and used the talismans to start a ritual. During the ritual, the mansion filled with deafening noises, and horrifying figures tried to stop him. But Javed didn't give up. Finally, there was a loud explosion, and the mansion fell silent. When Javed regained consciousness, he found himself outside the mansion. However, his camera and notebook were left behind. The locals say that no more screams are heard from the mansion, but Javed often dreams of the white-eyed man staring back at him in the dark. The Secret of Sonata Mansion, Part 2. After his horrifying experience at the mansion, Javed returned to his city. However, his mind remained fixated on the mansion's mystery. No matter how hard he tried, its presence lingered in his life. He often dreamed of the white-eyed figure, calling him back to the mansion. One day, Javed received an anonymous email on his computer. It simply read, "You are close to the truth, but the full secret is still hidden. In the sealed vault at the back of Sonata Mansion lies the answer to your questions." Javed's curiosity reignited. This time, he invited his friend Seima, an investigator with an interest in paranormal activities, to join him. Together, they planned a detailed exploration of the mansion, equipped with new tools and devices. The journey to the vault. When Javed and Seima stepped into the mansion, it felt even more terrifying than before. The silence was so deep it made their footsteps sound unnerving. They headed to the basement's back section, where they found an old sealed vault. Strange symbols and inscriptions, written in an ancient language, covered its surface. Seima said, "This looks like a talisman or binding spell meant to trap something. If we open it, something powerful could be unleashed." But Javed was determined to uncover the truth. Despite Seima's warnings, he unlocked the vault. A gust of wind howled through the mansion, accompanied by a piercing scream. From the vault emerged a dark, smoky shadow that disappeared into the mansion's walls, causing the entire structure to shake. Panicked, Javed and Seima ran to another room to hide. There, they found an old portrait of Zainab. Beneath the portrait was a small diary, detailing her last days. Mir Ibrahim had trapped a dark power within himself to keep him alive forever. He tried to involve me, but I betrayed him and sealed the power in this vault. If it is released, every soul in this mansion will become its slave. After reading the diary, Seymour said, "We've made a terrible mistake. Javid, we have to trap it again." The final battle. Javid and Seymour studied the rituals written in Zainab's diary. The ritual required them to climb to the top of the mansion's tower and light an ancient candle. But now, the dark shadow was chasing them through every corner of the mansion. On their way to the tower, they encountered more spirits hidden within the mansion. In one room, Seymour came across the shadow of a young girl who kept repeating, "He's coming for you." Finally, they reached the tower. As soon as the candle was lit, the shadow appeared in its true form. It was a terrifying, faceless entity, and its voice echoed through the mansion. Seymour began the ritual while Javid distracted the creature. At one point, the entity came dangerously close to Seymour, but Javid used a talisman to hold it back. As the ritual reached its climax, the mansion shook violently. With a loud explosion, the shadow was sucked back into the vault and sealed once again. A new mystery. Believing the nightmare was over, Javid and Seymour left the mansion. But the next day, Seymour received an email. It simply read, "This was just the beginning. The next secret awaits you." The Secret of Sanata Mansion, Part 3. After believing that they had solved the mystery of the mansion, Javid and Seymour had no idea that this was just the beginning. Seymour received an email with a video link. When he played the video, it showed a part of Sanata Mansion they had never seen before. A hidden, maze-like area. In the last frame of the video, a shadow appeared, staring at them, and a message appeared. "What you started, you must finish." Seymour immediately called Javid, and they both decided to return to the mansion. But this time, their journey would be much harder, for the mansion was no longer just a building. It had become a creature, trapping anyone who entered its grasp. The mansion's maze. When Javid and Seymour arrived back at the mansion, the door opened as before. However, the layout inside had changed completely. Every path now seemed like a maze, where at every turn, a new horrifying sight awaited them. At the first corner, they saw Zainab's shadow again. But this time, she remained silent. She held an old sword in her hand and spoke only one thing. "The true secret of this mansion is still hidden. You both must reach it, or your fate will be like those who came before you." Javid and Seymour followed Zainab, but she disappeared further into the mansion. At every turn, they saw the same burnt figures, each whispering, "Time is running out." The unveiling of the old secret. As they walked deeper into the mansion, they arrived at a large hall. Here, they found an old map hidden beneath a book. The map marked the location of a secret room beneath the mansion. Javid and Seymour decided to search for the room. To reach the basement, they had to use an old elevator that stopped at every floor, with eerie sounds echoing in the air. Inside the elevator, Seymour felt as though someone was standing behind him, but when he turned around, no one was there. However, in the reflection of the elevator mirror, he saw a third shadow standing between him and Javid. When they reached the basement, an old grave awaited them. The inscription on the grave read, "Mir Ibrahim, the Keeper of Souls." The final moment, Javid and Seymour opened the grave, revealing an old chest. When they opened it, black smoke poured out, and the mansion began to shake. Inside the chest was a strange book, with the inscription, "Whoever reads this becomes part of the story." Seymour started reading the book, realizing that it described the true secret of Mir Ibrahim. Mir Ibrahim was not just a man but a vessel for a dark power. His soul was still trapped in the mansion, and if the book wasn't closed, the power would be released and destroy everything. Javid tried to close the book, but he felt a deep connection between his hands and the walls of the mansion. The mansion was not ready to let him leave. Zainab's shadow appeared again and said, "If you wish to leave alive, you must free your soul." Javid closed the book, but he knew that part of his soul had to remain behind in the mansion. The mansion fell silent, but Javid and Seymour knew this was far from over. The final scream. Javid and Seymour returned to the city, but a few days later, Javid saw the same white-eyed shadow in his house at night. The shadow said only one thing: "You still have something to leave behind." The final secret of Sanata Mansion. The scream of the shadow with white eyes had become a part of Javid's life. Every night, he felt like the mansion was calling him. Seymour wasn't safe from its effects either. One night, as they decided to talk about it, the lights in Seymour's house suddenly went out, and the doors began to close by themselves. Seima found a note that floated into his hand. It simply read, "The soul the mansion left behind is trapped inside you. You both must return back to the mansion." Javed and Seima decided to make the final decision. This time, they brought a friend, Ali, who was a paranormal expert. The three of them prepared with amulets, holy water, and ancient books of spells. But they had no idea how the mansion was waiting for them this time. As they entered the mansion, it was completely silent. The walls didn't scream anymore, and no shadows appeared. But an eerie coldness and a spine-chilling heat were felt with every step they took. The door to the secret. As soon as they entered, they saw a new line on the ground leading them beneath the mansion, toward the basement maze. Behind the line was a small door that had never been seen before. When they opened it, a deep darkness greeted them, and only one thing was written inside. "Without sacrifice, there is no freedom." Javed realized that the mansion was demanding something from them. Seima said, "These are just threats. We'll need to rely on our tools." The three of them stepped inside. The feeling of sacrifice. Inside the door, a small line appeared, following them as they walked. Eventually, they reached a large hall, where Zainab's true shadow awaited them. But this time, Zainab was crying. Zainab said, "I cannot help you. You will have to sacrifice a part of your soul if you wish to end the mansion's mystery." Javed asked, "Does this mean we'll die here?" Zainab said only one thing. No one has survived long enough to answer that question. The final confrontation. In the center of the hall was a large stone pedestal. As they approached it, the true secret of the mansion revealed itself. May Ibrahim in his true form. His face was no longer white but completely dark. He said, "Everyone who has come here has become part of my soul. You will too." Javed began chanting his spells. Seima sprayed holy water, and Ali used his amulet. May Ibrahim screamed in pain and moved back. But the mansion's influence was becoming even more terrifying. Javed realized Zainab had been right. He said to Ali and Seima, "I'm ready to give a part of my soul. You both run." But Seima and Ali refused to leave. The final decision. Together, they placed their hands on the pedestal and began reading the spells Zainab had given them. May Ibrahim screamed, but the mansion slowly began to shake. The pedestal shattered with a loud explosion, and the mansion's influence disappeared. May Ibrahim and his dark power were trapped inside the mansion forever. Javed, Seima, and Ali fell to the ground, but they were alive. A new beginning. The mansion was now an empty building, slowly turning to dust. As the three of them left, they realized the true secret of the mansion. This was a story of freedom and the soul's revenge. May Ibrahim and his power are now trapped forever. But then something strange happened. When Javed returned home, there was a new email on his computer screen. "The soul you freed is now waiting for you." Other news story. The Midnight Caller. When Sarah first heard the phone ring at midnight, she didn't think much of it. It was just a coincidence, she reasoned. Or maybe it was a wrong number. She had been living alone in the old house for almost a year, having moved out to escape the noise and chaos of the city. The isolation suited her. Peaceful, quiet, except for the occasional howling of the wind outside and the creaking of the old wooden beams. Her parents had left her the house after they died, and while it was starting to fall apart, it was home. The first call was soft, a single ring echoing in the darkness. It startled her at first, and she glanced at the clock on the wall. 12 a.m. She rolled over, rubbed her eyes, and picked up the receiver, her voice thick with sleep. "Hello." There was nothing but silence. No breathing, no sound of movement, just the soft hum of the line, the kind you'd expect from a bad connection. She frowned and pulled the phone away, making sure the line was still active. "Hello? Is someone there?" Nothing. Just static. A shiver ran down her spine as she hung up, blaming the storm outside. The wind had been fierce all evening, making the old house groan with the weight of its age. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and returned to bed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Still, she dismissed it as her imagination and eventually drifted back to sleep. But the ringing came again. The second night, the call came at exactly midnight. This time, Sarah was awake when it happened, her eyes wide open in the dark room, staring at the ceiling. The phone's shrill tone cut through the silence, and her heart skipped a beat. She sat up in bed, the familiar dread creeping back. Hello? No answer. Just that horrible, oppressive silence. She waited, staring at the receiver as if expecting something, anything, to speak from the other end. She held her breath, a lump forming in her throat. The feeling of being watched was back, even stronger this time. And then, the line crackled. Sarah. Her blood ran cold. The voice was low, breathy, and familiar, but wrong. It didn't sound like anyone she knew. It was distorted, almost as if it was coming from a great distance, like someone shouting into the void of an endless, unending night. Who is this? She asked, her voice trembling. There was a pause, a heavy one, before the voice spoke again, slower this time. Don't you remember me, Sarah? A cold sweat broke out across her skin. The voice, it sounded like someone she hadn't heard from in years. A voice she thought had disappeared from her life forever. Her father. But that wasn't possible. Her father had died 5 years ago in a car accident, a random, tragic twist of fate. She never heard his voice after the funeral. He was gone. Who is this? She repeated, her voice now shaky. The line went dead. Her hands were clammy as she set the receiver down. She tried to shake off the feeling creeping up her spine, but she couldn't. She couldn't explain it. How the voice had sounded so real, so vivid. She told herself it was just the storm playing tricks on her. The old house. Her mind wandering too far. But deep down, she felt the cold grip of something darker, something lingering in the silence. The calls kept coming. Every night, at midnight, without fail. The voice was always the same, distorted, familiar, and deeply unsettling. Sometimes it spoke of things only her father could have known. Intimate details, memories, secrets from their past. Other times, it was nothing but garbled static, just enough to remind her that something was out there. One night, after the voice called again, Sarah decided she couldn't take it anymore. She had to know who was on the other end of the line. She couldn't live like this, in a state of constant fear, wondering if it was a ghost, or if it was something far worse. At 11:59 p.m., Sarah stood by the phone, staring at the clock as the second hand ticked closer to midnight. She gripped the receiver tight, determined not to let the phone go unanswered. As the clock struck 12, the phone rang, cutting through the silence like a blade. She picked it up, her pulse racing. Hello. The voice came through almost immediately, slow and deliberate, chilling to the bone. Sarah, you should have never picked up the phone. You should have stayed away from the past. Her heart nearly stopped. What do you want from me? She gasped. There was a long, terrifying pause. I want you to remember. A deafening silence followed. No more static, no more distortion. Just the voice, clearer than ever before. I want you to remember what you did. The blood drained from Sarah's face as the memory crashed into her all at once. She had forgotten, buried it deep inside her, trying to erase it from her life. It had been so long ago. But now, it came flooding back in the most horrific way. She remembered now, the argument, the fight, the night her father left the house in anger, never to return. She had driven him to that rage, pushed him too far. But it wasn't her fault, was it? She had only been a child. Yet, the voice told her she was responsible, that she had caused his death. And now, he was calling her from beyond the grave, angry, accusing, and seeking retribution. The phone went dead again. But this time, the silence felt more suffocating than before. Something was in the room with her. Something old and bitter. Something that had been waiting in the dark for a long time. Sarah hung up the receiver, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel alone. Because the voice wasn't done with her yet. Third other story. The haunted doll. Lena had always been a collector of old things. She loved the dusty, forgotten items from another time. The kind that had history. So when she saw the doll at the flea market, she knew it was something special. Its porcelain face was cracked and chipped, its dress faded with age. But something about it pulled her in. The old woman behind the stall said the doll had been in her family for generations. It's not much, the woman said, her voice raspy. But it's got a way of making people uneasy. My grandmother used to say it had a spirit inside. Lena laughed it off. A haunted doll. Ridiculous. But she had to admit, there was something about its glassy eyes that made her feel strange, as though it was watching her. She bought it for a bargain and brought it home, placing it on a shelf in her living room, next to the old books and trinkets she had collected over the years. For the first few days, nothing seemed off, but then things started to happen. It began with the noises. At night, after Lena had gone to bed, she would hear faint tapping, like fingernails scraping against wood. She'd get up to check, but find nothing out of place. Just the doll, sitting still on its shelf. Then the eyes. Lena started to feel like the doll was staring at her. She couldn't explain it, but whenever she looked at it, its eyes seemed to follow her. She tried moving it, shifting it around the room, but it didn't matter. No matter where she put it, its eyes were always fixed on her. One evening, Lena came home after work and found the doll in a different spot on the shelf. It was as if it had moved on its own. She was sure she had placed it facing forward, but now it was turned to the side, its head slightly tilted as if it was watching her. Lena's heart began to race, but she shook it off. It's just my imagination, she told herself. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Things got worse. The tapping became louder, almost like scratching. It sounded like the doll was trying to get out of its wooden box. Then one night, Lena woke to find the doll on the floor, its limbs twisted in unnatural angles. She tried to ignore it, but that was the night she felt it. A cold breeze, chilling and unnatural, moved across her room, and with it, a voice, low and faint, like a whisper in her ear. "Help me." She bolted upright in bed, heart pounding. The voice was gone, but the coldness lingered. That's when she began to feel a deep unease that she couldn't shake. The doll seemed to be affecting her dreams. Every night, she dreamt of an old house, one that looked like it could have been the doll's original home. She would see a little girl with dark, sad eyes sitting by a fireplace, holding the doll tightly to her chest. The girl would whisper things to the doll, things Lena couldn't understand, but the words felt heavy, like they were buried deep in her soul. The worst night came when Lena woke up to find the doll sitting at the foot of her bed. She screamed, her voice echoing through the empty house. She ran to grab it, but when she touched the porcelain face, she felt a shock run through her hand, like static electricity. The doll's eyes seemed to widen, and in that moment, Lena could feel something dark and old pushing against her mind, something angry. The next day, she decided to get rid of the doll. She put it in a box, taped it shut, and drove out to the woods. She found a quiet spot near a river and tossed the box into the water. Watching it sink, she felt a sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. But as she turned to leave, she heard the whisper again, faint but unmistakable. "Not yet." Lena froze, her heart racing. She turned around and saw something she couldn't explain. There, on the shore, just above the waterline, was the doll. It was back, its glassy eyes staring straight at her, as if it had never left. She ran home, but the doll followed her. Every night, it would return to her home, no matter how far she took it. The tapping would get louder, the whispers more frequent, until Lena could no longer sleep. She was haunted by it, by the cold presence that had attached itself to her, unwilling to let go. In her desperation, Lena contacted a local priest, hoping he could help her. He came to her house, walked through the rooms, and stood silently for a moment before looking at her with pity in his eyes. "There's something wrong with that doll," he said. "It's not just a doll. It's a vessel for something evil." The priest tried everything, blessings, prayers, even holy water, but nothing worked. The doll remained, growing more powerful with each passing day, until Lena couldn't take it any longer. One night, as she sat alone, staring at the doll that sat silently on the shelf, the room grew unbearably cold. She could hear the whispers again, louder this time. The voice, angry and desperate, seemed to come from inside her head. "Help me." Lena turned to face the doll, her mind racing. She grabbed it, holding it in her arms for the first time, feeling the weight of its cursed past. In that moment, she understood. The doll wasn't the one who needed help. It was her. She had been chosen, connected to something much darker than she could have ever imagined. And now, it was too late to break free.